In this video, we're going to be taking a look at how we can use some very simple geometry to make our biggest primary form for our project. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, in the video after this, we're going to be taking a look at how we can make this pillar that you see directly in front of us, but we're going to do it in a non-destructive way using the live Boolean system. But before we look at that pretty complicated way of creating geometry, I wanted to show you maybe a little bit simpler way of creating geometry. In the previous video, we just looked at a bunch of different ways that we can create primitive shapes, and we'll be starting off with a primitive shape and then building upon that to try to build something very similar to the shape that you see right here before us. So I know that what I did with this one, if we take any shape, we can append any shape. It doesn't matter if it's a cube, sphere. I'll just do a sphere to make this really obvious what's going on here. So we just appended that sphere, select the sphere itself, and then if we go back down to the bottom where we've got initialize, we looked at this in the previous video where we can do a Q cube, and I'll just leave the resolution on 2 by 2 by 2, and I'll hit Q cube, and that'll leave us right here at the base of this. So in the next video over, we scale this thing up, and I show a couple different ways that we can scale this thing up. Now what we could do, we could put on move, make sure it's on the gizmo 3D tool. I'll hit Alt S. I do have a hotkey set up for the solo button. Remember that. So when you get my interface, you can also go to preferences. You can go to hotkeys, and you can load the hotkeys that I gave. So you could use that same preference if you want. I think it definitely makes things a lot easier. So to get this gizmo tool at the very bottom corner, I can hold down Alt and then just click down here, and it'll snap to that vert. Now if I want to reset the orientation of this, I can hold down Alt and then click the reset button like that. And then now we've got this pivot down here. I'm going to zoom out a little bit so we're seeing about this much of our screen. And then I'll go ahead and take the scale button here like this and then hold down shift while I do this and then scale it up 6 right there. So it should snap in different increments of scale for us. And then when we're done with that, if we turn on the polyframe, you should see what we've got going on here. We've got this right here. So I'm going to show you the Z Modeler brush. So that actually sits directly down here. So we got Z Modeler. And if you want to go through the brush system, you can always do B, then tap Z, and then you can find it within here. So it's pretty easy to find any of the brushes. If we hover a cursor over a face or an edge or a vert, we're going to get different operations when we hold down the space bar. So I'm going to use edges, and I'm going to right click on here, and I'm going to say insert. And if you've ever done any box modeling, you know that you can insert an edge loop and you can do something like this, right? I want nice and even spacing on the stuff that I'm doing. So I'm going to hit undo. If we do the space bar over the for that edge, we can select multiple edge loops, and at this time we could do specified resolution, or we could do interactive elevation. Let's try that. And if we click and drag out, you can see we can interactively change the resolution that we've got going on here like that. So I'll drag it out to here. Let me hit undo. Let me make sure I'm getting the right spacing on here. So I want nice and even cubes like that. And we'll click and drag this one as well. And I'll go one more just like that. And now you can see we basically have that same cube that we started with, and we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them right there in that particular space. So I'm going to show you a little bit about polygroups and how we could group things a certain way. So polygroups make it really easy for us to hold down Control and Shift, and then we can click on a polygroup and we can show and hide certain sections like this. So there's different ways that we can make polygroups. If we hold down Control and Shift and then drag in the open viewport, we can make a selection like something like this. And it didn't grab everything, so I'm going to grab everything there like that. And if we hit Control W, that's going to make a polygroup. So if we open up polygroups area, basically what I did with Control W was group visible right here like this. I did make a hotkey for this Control Shift W, and that is group whatever's visible by islands. So if we hold on Control and Shift and click something like this, and we do auto groups, you can see this is an island, this is an island, and this is an island. So is this. So it's going to make that all into separate polygroups. And now you can see how it would be really easy for us to hold down Control Shift, make selections. Sorry, we got to grab some of that. And if we hold down Control and Shift and we drag, we can get the inverse of that. So it just makes it really simple for you to start selecting stuff. Something else they have is group by normal. So if we hit group by normals, and I just have the default angle, this tolerance. So anything that's, I think, greater than a 45-degree angle, or anything that sits underneath of that, it's going to turn that into a polygroup. So that works there. And then what I could do is just go through here. I'm going to show this one. So all I did was hold down Control and Shift, click on this, and it shows that. And then if I hold down Control and Shift, if I want to subtract a selection, I can hold down Control and Shift, and I can add the Alt spacebar modifier to that. Now if I hit Control W, that's just doing the group visible. Now if I hold down Control Shift, drag, and then add the Alt modifier, Control W, go through. Oops, let me hit Control W. And if you keep cycling, you can choose different colors, Control W. So I'm just hitting that over and over and over again. So now you can see we've got something that's nice and color-coded for us. We could go through and do that on both the whole entire thing. So if I hit Control W like this, instead of doing just that one part, what I could do is make a polygroup, make a polygroup, make a polygroup, polygroup, like that. And then now we've got a nice and easy way to select each one of these sections, like that. Okay, and so the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to turn this middle section and scale it in. So if you hold down Control, we can click and drag out. If you add the spacebar modifier, you can move it around and let go of spacebar, and then you get a new place where it's going to sit. So if I was going to just mask those points right in through there and do the inverse of it, I can hit Control and just click on the open viewport, or I can hit Control I, either way to inverse that. And then now I can put it on the gizmo tool, hold down Alt, and then just click on this go to unmask mesh center like this, and then we could scale this down. So that would be an easy shape for us to do. I'm going to show you the Z modeler tool, and I'm going to use that same tool that we had before. So I'm going to hover my cursor over an edge, and then I'll put on the Z modeler brush right down here, and then I'll go over the edge, spacebar, and then what we could do this time, we could do an insert, or this time we could do a bevel. And if we did a bevel on this edge, you can see we can just bevel this part out right through there, like that. Then now if we hold down Control and drag through here, and then Control and click in the open viewport to inverse that, and put it on the gizmo tool, now we could just scale that down just like that and get a shape that we have just like this. Okay, so that's really the basis of our shape. That's all we've got to do. Now I'm going to show you some additional things. We're going to turn this geometry into Dynamesh. So in order to do that, we're going to go under Geometry, open that up, open up Dynamesh, that sits right in here. And then we're going to put it on resolution of, let's try 500 to start off with, and take the blur and put it down to 0. Not 5,500. So let's go ahead and click that, and it didn't take my 500. I'm just going to click off of it and hit enter, and I'm going to take this and put that to 0 and then click. And I think that's going to give us a pretty good amount of geometry to work with. On my interface, I also give you this polish, and remember, you can hold down Control, and if you look at the bottom, it's always going to tell you where that thing sits. So it's actually in the deformation menu under polish. So I'll put it at about 40% polish. That number is not super specific, but you can see it's going to round out the corners pretty nicely for us. So that's kind of nice for it to do that. So remember, if we hold down Control and Shift, if we turn on our polyframe information, you can see that it's still retaining the polygroup information. We can turn the line off if we don't want to look at that. That looks confusing. And you can see these are the different shapes that it's going to give us. I'm going to go to the side here. If we tap P, we can turn on and off our perspective. So that's going to go from the side. And I'm going to hold down Control and Shift, and I'm going to click, and I'm going to drag out, and I'm going to just grab the very front of this like this within through here. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to subtract selection of what we're visibly looking at. I'm going to basically build a lip on here and the top, bottom of this, in these shapes. So I'm going to make a square within here and then a rectangle shape within here. And we're going to turn those into new polygroup information. So Control Shift, I want to turn on symmetry. If I tap X, you can see I can turn on symmetry. So now when I do this, Control Shift, then drag out like this. If I hold down Alt, I can click, and it's going to subtract the same thing on both sides. So if I hit Control W, that's going to make a polygroup. Let's just hold down Control Shift, bring everything back, so you can kind of see what's going on here and what we're trying to build. Let me turn off the line just so it makes it a little bit simpler to see. So you see how we've isolated that shape and this shape. I'm going to hit undo real quick, and I'm going to hit. Let me do this. I'm going to hold down Control and Shift, and hold down Alt, and then subtract this. Do the same, Control Shift, drag out, and then add Alt. And then I'm going to subtract this. Same here, Control Shift with Alt. Control Shift, and then add Alt. And I'll hit Control W. And then Control Shift, just click in the open viewport to bring everything back. I'll tap P to turn perspective back on. And then now what I can do, I'm going to show you this. If we hold on Control and Shift and select this, we can actually shrink our visibility of what we see. So that actually exists under visibility. So if we go to visibility right here, we can shrink like this. And now I can hit Control W, and then I'm going to hold down Control Shift, bring everything back, and you see how we basically built this lip that we made right in here. So let's just say that's not enough. I'm going to hit undo. We're going to shrink that again, hit Control W, and then take a look. That's a pretty good size, right? The next thing I'm going to show you is we could do this. We could hold down Control and Shift, and this is another powerful thing about polygroups is it makes it really easy to show and hide sections. And if we just want to mask that area, hold down Control and then just click once and it masks it. Now if you hold down Control Shift to bring back the visibility of everything, if I hit Control I or I just Control click in the open viewport, we can inverse that. And now if I put it in the gizmo tool, I could just push this thing back, and I could make this into like an extrusion, and I could have it be pretty clean geometry. Now, before we do that, I'm going to show you one other trick that helps keep that geometry super clean whenever you push that in. So, if we go and say Control Shift, just show that part right there. If we go under Geometry, there is a edge loop area, and if you go into the interface that I gave you, I'm going to have off to the side there should be hard surface, and there is a group loops on here, and I'm going to put this down to 1. That will just put one really close edge loop all along the outer part of these. If it was on 4, it would do 4 edge loops. We don't need that, so that's why I'm going to put it on 1 and then just hit group loops like this. Now you see how it shrunk the corners and rounded it off. I'm going to hit undo real quick. You can see this group polish that's on 50. So if you put that on like 5, let's hit group loops. It's still pretty decent, but let's just take it all the way to 0. And that'll give us something that's pretty nice and crisp. So it makes a mask. I'm going to get rid of the mask. I'm going to hold on Control Shift, click on this green part, hold on Control, click to mask, Control Shift to click again, and then I'm going to Control click in the open viewport. So I know this is a lot, but once you get used to this workflow, like it'll go super fast, and you can make very clean shapes with this. And so I'm just going to push this thing in just a little bit like that. Okay. So I want to show you something else. That same workflow that we did for showing and hiding, we can also do this. I'm going to put it on just a standard brush, make my brush size smaller, and we could hold down Control and we could paint a mask like this. And if you want to subtract from a mask, you could hold down Control and Alt at the same time and then paint. And if I hold down Control, I can keep adding to this. If I hold on Control and Alt, we can subtract, make your brush size smaller, do some more masks like that. And you can hit Control W and it'll make whatever that selection is into a polygroup. And now I could hold on Control Shift, select that polygroup. We could use the edge loop, or sorry, the group loops like that, and we could do that same operation that we just did. And now we could mask that, bring it back, inverse it, and then put it on move. And now at this point, I actually might want to do this. Since I accidentally did it all the way through, I want it to go in the center of this. So I do have symmetry turned on, and I think if I just push it in this direction, we should be good to go for that. Okay, and then I'm going to show you this. That's nice and jaggedy, and that's not really what I want. This technique I showed you for building this extra edge with a polygroup, if you hold on Control, you click on your mask, it'll smooth out the mask. And then we can use this polish by feature. I'm going to take off this little donut hole center, and that makes it stronger. And I'm just going to click and drag just slightly this direction, and it'll smooth. It smooths out the surface, but it recognizes polygroups, and so that's why it's keeping this grouping information that you see within there. Like that. So there just wasn't enough geometry in there, so that's why I kind of pulled these parts together. So I'll just smooth that out just a little bit. And maybe we polish by feature. You can see that all these edges are really jaggedy. If I did it for the entire object, I can do it for the entire object, and it'll make it nice and crisp and smooth. But it's not what I want, right? I just wanted to show this to you as a possibility. So I'm going to hit undo to get back to where we were at before with this. And so if we re-dynamesh this, let's just go back to that and close this up. Let's just go to Dynamesh. This time let's up the resolution. Let's go to like 900 and then let's remesh. And you can always check to make sure it remeshed by clicking on line and then just check, make sure it rebuilt the topology for you. So now I want to bevel these corners a little bit on here. So I can hold down Control Shift, select this. I want to select these outer parts like this, then mask this. Just hold down Control and select it. Now let's bring everything back. We'll do Control Shift and select. And to blur the mask, let's just hold down Control and then click and blur the mask a little bit. And then we can do a little bit of a polish on that, just like that. And we've gotten rid of that. So now we've built a pillar, and we've done it pretty simple. We've done it with, I would say, some pretty decent precision. I know that we're basically kind of eyeballing this, and this is more of a sculptural process. The next video over is going to be a lot more complicated, and there are some techniques to even get us even simpler to like what we got going on here, but I do want to introduce you to some of these techniques and know that you have the ability to make really clean shapes right off the bat. I think that's a super powerful thing. So in the next video series over, we're going to be taking a look at how we can use the live Boolean system to make geometry. The cool thing about live Booleans is that you're able to interactively change parameters about the design. So we could go back and change the thickness of these things, and there's all kinds of stuff that we could do. We could change the middle part and everything about the design. So it makes it into a non-destructive workflow. And so when you're working non-destructively, you're going to be able to have somebody like an art director come over and say, you know what, I really want to kind of change some of these elements. Can you show me some different possibilities for this? And you could do it live right in front of them. So it's a very powerful system. I know as you're starting off, it's probably going to be a little bit complicated and it's probably going to be maybe a lot of work, but just work through it because I think the effort to learn that system will be greatly beneficial to you for the rest of the duration of you trying to learn how to digital sculpt.